I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. At a Florida Sheriff's Association summer conference on Tuesday, Governor Ron DeSantis blasted the defund the police movement and commented on the recent attack on Lee Zeldin. Zeldin, a congressman with whom DeSantis served and the Republican gubernatorial nominee in New York, was recently threatened by a man who jumped on stage during an event. The man was released by state authorities before being brought into federal custody. DeSantis blasted New York's lax bail laws, touting his state's tough on crime policies. Opposing defunding law enforcement and progressive criminal justice policies is a cornerstone of Republican talking points going into the 2022 midterms, where DeSantis himself is running for re-election.
And net in migration. And I'm not recruiting people to come to Florida. Like, we've got a lot of great people. We've got a lot of great opportunities. Some governors just beg people to come to their states. I'm not doing that, but it's a free country, and people are allowed to travel where they want. You know, some say, can you restrict people coming in Florida? You're not allowed to do that constitutionally. If we could, I would set up an immigration system, and we could do that, but we can't. So it is what it is. But people have come, and so and this has been like a big deal. The states that have done lockdowns and taxes and all that have lost a lot of people. Florida has gained. Texas and others have done too, but we've done the most. I'll tell you though, you talk to these people, particularly the families, yes, taxes, certainly the COVID insanity. They wanted to get away from a lot of those arbitrary lockdowns and restrictions, but feeling safe and law and order has been a huge thing that Florida has distinguished itself versus a lot of these other states. You know, and it's not just the states, you know, you would think of, you know, blue versus red. You know, you have places, we have people moving from Buckhead in Atlanta to Florida in numbers we've never seen before because the crime is just absolutely off the rails there. I've talked to people in Southern California, like in Los Angeles, very nice places, and they have to take off, the women have to take off their jewelry just to go shopping. And these are even in nice areas because you can steal a certain amount and rob people, and the prosecutor will not prosecute you for doing that. So that's created a culture of lawlessness. Now, if you think back, how did New York City go in the 80s and early 90s from just a total cesspool to being a city that took crime seriously, saw declines in murders, all that stuff? They focused on the small stuff. They created a culture of law and order, and that ended up also leading to fewer really serious crimes. So you have a movement in this country for certain prosecutors to say, you know what, we're above the law, effectively, is what they're saying. Yeah, the legislature, you guys can elect people to your legislature, you can pass laws, you can have the governor sign the laws, but if we don't like that law, we're just going to ignore it. You want to prosecute people from going into a store and stealing? We don't think that that's consistent with social justice, so we're not going to do it. And you see that in city after city in this country, and the result has been catastrophic. You've seen crime go up. These places that have these prosecutors, it's dragged down the vitality of the places. It's really started to fray the social order. And so that has no place in the state of Florida. You know, we believe in enforcing the law across the board. And if you don't like the law, then go run for office, the legislature, and try to change the law. But you don't take it upon yourself as a prosecutor to just simply ignore the law. And so we're very much opposed to that movement amongst those prosecutors nationwide, and I think we've had some play footsie with it here in Florida to do that. And the danger is, if you look at San Francisco, they recalled the district attorney there, which a lot of people thought was not possible of happening. If you look at the vote on the recall of doing it, you know, the very affluent areas voted to keep the prosecutor. Why? Because they're immune from a lot of this stuff. You know, they have security, they live behind gated walls, whatever. Who voted to recall? All the working class people voted to recall this guy. Why? Because they're bearing the brunt of these really destructive policies. The same thing with defunding law enforcement. You know, you have the movement, they've had tax on law enforcement for longer than just 2 years ago, but 2 years ago, you know, you have all these protests, many of them devolved into riots, and the whole mantra was defund law enforcement, that somehow if a criminal is committing a serious crime, you can call out a social worker, and that would be better than having somebody with a badge show up. And so it was insane at the time. We said that in Florida, that it was insane at the time. But, there were jurisdictions around the country that indulged this idiocy. They slashed funding for law enforcement in places like Seattle, New York City, all these other places. And again, just like you do a prosecutor that says we don't care about the law, when you take people off the street, when you cut resources. And honestly, as much as that was a problem, the signal that sends, I think, is even more of a problem, because it's telling the people wearing the uniform you don't have support. So why would you want to stick your neck out into a situation knowing you can do everything right, and then you could end up the bad guy because you don't have support from the community and the elected officials and all this stuff? So it was really, really harmful, and that contributed to crime going through the roof. You look at what's happening in New York, where they eliminated cash bail. So this guy's a friend of mine running for governor, Zeldin. You got a guy that was trying to stab him, and then what happens? He gets put right back on the street. Like no cash, just put right back on the street, very minimal charge, and then just go. And that's the way it is. And you wonder why they have so many problems in a lot of their urban areas in particular, and people have been fleeing it. So we've rejected all of those types of policies. We also believe in truth in sentencing. If you do the crime, you do the time. I don't know why they're releasing a lot of these criminals off the street or out of jail and putting them back into the street. That has never proven to be successful anywhere in the modern history of our country. So we're not going to do that here in the state of Florida. I mean, we understand that there are folks that mean to do harm in our communities, and when they do, they need to be brought to justice, and they need to pay the penalty for that. So we're going to be committed to doing that. So in Florida, as they were doing the defund, we said we're not going to do that, and we actually passed legislation saying a local government in Florida cannot defund law enforcement. We'll just put the money back if they try to do it. Because if you think about it, these local government races, sometimes you can elect people to these local governments, and what? You get a slim majority on some local government, and they do these idiotic things, and then the citizens have to pay the penalty for that. We're not going to let them cut off their nose to spite their face. And so we have protections there. So that's effectively off the table in the state of Florida. And we also beefed up our penalties for people that may be engaging in mob violence or rioting or looting, particularly when they're targeting law enforcement and those types of things. You can't just take their mugshot and put them back on the street. They need to be in jail. And so they're in jail now until first appearance, and the penalties are increased here in the state of Florida. And I think that's part of the reason why we're not viewed as a state that people want to come, and do a lot of this in, because they know that it's not going to end up well for them. So we're going to continue being very strong on that. And then we were able to say, okay, they're defunding law enforcement, so we're going to fund. So we did from the state, for the first time ever, every sworn law enforcement, municipal, county, and state, in the last budget year got a $1,000 bonus across the board. And we were proud of that. And honestly, it's always nice to get more money. Of course, when we proposed the $1,000 bonus, I think it was probably sometime at the end of 2020. That was worth a little bit more than it is now with all the inflation that we've seen. But nevertheless, it's important, and people, I think, appreciate it. But it was much more than the money. It was just, it was a token of our support from the state for the mission that the men and women of law enforcement have, and the importance of that to a healthy and free society. And so we did that, and we were able to do it again. So this current fiscal year started July 1st. I know they're working on putting together the checks, and so I don't want to say the check's in the mail, but it will be in the mail soon. And everybody, and all our sheriff's deputies, and as well as our police officers, are going to get a $1,000 bonus again for the second year in a row. So we're proud of being able to do that. We're also proud of being a place that law enforcement around the country look to as a source of inspiration, and many want to come here. We did the recruitment package where they come, they can get a $5,000 signing bonus. You know, we're defraying a lot of the costs of any exams or things that have to take. But we also want to make sure that people growing up in Florida view this as a noble profession. And so we expanded scholarships for people to go to law enforcement academy. And we gave every law enforcement family the ability to do our school choice program, because that's a very good program, but it's really geared towards low-income families and mostly single mothers. But we've raised the income eligibility to try to get it more into the middle class, because especially certain parts of the state, you know, you can make a decent amount of money and it still costs a lot, so we want to be sensitive to that. But we also said, you know, if you're in law enforcement and you want to participate in our school choice program, you know, whatever your income level is, you are in, and you're not going to be excluded on that basis. So now families have the option to take this scholarship and take it to the school of their choice. That's anywhere in the state of Florida for the sons and daughters of people who are active in law enforcement. I don't think any other state has done that. So that's a huge benefit that we were able to get enacted this year, starting July 1st. And so we're really proud of that. You know, and we're also just proud of what we've been able to do. I know we did more for the sheriffs themselves in terms of the compensation that the sheriffs got. And then I know I talked with a lot of the rural counties about making sure that they had money to increase the deputies' salaries. And so that was a pretty big deal. Yep. We also took care of our state law enforcement. We had the largest compensation increase for state law enforcement agencies in the history of Florida. So most of them got about a 15% salary increase when everything was considered. And so we're proud of that, and we're going to do more going forward. We also did a lot with corrections to make sure that we were keeping people involved there. And so I think if you look at the last couple years, I don't think any state has done more to support law enforcement than the state of Florida. And so we wear that as a badge of honor. We're happy to be doing that because we understand how important these issues are.